with open hearts and open minds. First United Methodist Church in Pueblo, Colorado presents Hope and Coffee with Pastor Hugo Venegas.
Hi, welcome back to Hope and Coffee. Coffee. It is Wednesday and we're continuing to study the lessons of hope from the life of Abraham. And we're talking this week about hungering after God's blessings. We have to stay hungry after God's blessings because we may have our blessings stolen. We may have it delayed. And once we stay hungry, we stay on track to receiving the promises of God in our lives. Now, I have an interesting question for you today for us to reflect on. And here is the question. Who is the most blessed person in your family? Think about it. You look at all the siblings, all the relatives, all the cousins, the uncles, the grandparents. Who is the most blessed family member that you have? I would say, hands down, my mother. My mother, she was the most blessed person in the family. Why? Because she was a servant, she was a teacher, she was an educator, and she had a way of motivating poor students to become scholars. She had a way of inspiring students who came from very poor backgrounds to become nurses and educators and doctors and engineers. And wherever my mom went, she inspired students. And we were so blessed to see that miracle after miracle of poor kids getting educated, finishing school, because the inspiration that my mother was to those little children. And also the other thing that I can see in my mom is the quality of her relationships. We could not go out with our mom without spending hours just her talking to people. Wherever she went, she had friends. She had a quality of relationships. Even yesterday, I got an email from a man that I haven't spoken to in almost 40 years. And he emailed me to say, I just thought about your mother. What a blessed woman. 40 years after I haven't spoken to this man, and he messages me and saying that my mom was a blessing to his family and a good buddy to his mom. And who is the most blessed person in your family? Well, the reason I'm asking is we have to stay hungry. And I believe that those in our family who are the most hungry after God are the ones who get the blessing. And it's not always the most educated. It's not always the most wealthy, because we have wealthy relatives who are miserable. We have relatives who are highly educated who are miserable. It's the blessing of God. It's the presence of God. It's the favor of God. It's the protection of God in our lives that makes us wealthy, that makes us prosper. And when I talk about wealth, I'm not talking about the health and prosperity gospel. I'm just talking about the presence of God. But you have to understand something, that there are some people who have an anti-belief in material blessings. As we saw in Isaac, God blessed his flocks. God blessed him with wells. God's blessing is not an ethereal vapor that just, or a halo over our heads. We see it in the quality of our relationships. We see it in the joy of our vocation. We see it in the joy of how we serve, how we do mission, how we do evangelism. We see it in the quality of our friendships. That's the blessing of God. It's not just a little thing here, but I don't want us to go on the other side, which is God is going to bless me. I'm going to get a Mercedes. Oh, God is going to bless me. I'm claiming that trip to Hawaii. I'm claiming that trip to Hawaii. All right, there is an exaggeration of that. But there is also a fear that I see in a lot of Christians, that they just believe that the blessing of God is a little halo. No, he blesses your water. He blesses your food. He blesses your relationship. His presence is manifested in your life. His protection is over you. He gives us health. He allows us to experience miracles. That's the blessing of God. So we're going to talk about two brothers, the twin brothers, the grandkids of Abraham. One was hungry after God's blessing, and the other one just took God's blessing for granted. So I'm going to talk about Isaac's sons, Jacob and Esau. So go to Genesis 25. Let me pick it up at verse 19. This is the account of the family line of Abraham's son Isaac. Abraham became the father of Isaac. And Isaac was 40 years old when he married Rebekah of Bethuel, the Aramean from Paddan Aram, the sister of Laban of the Aramean. Isaac prayed to the Lord on behalf of his wife. She was childless. Do you see this repetition? Sarah was barren, and so is Rebekah. So this son, Isaac, experiences the same thing that his father went through, barrenness. And he prayed to the Lord, and the Lord answered his prayer, and his wife Rebekah became pregnant. The babies jostled each other within her, and she said, "Why is this happening with me? Why is this happening to me?" So she went and inquired of the Lord, and the Lord said to her, "Two nations are in your womb, and two peoples from within you will be separated. One will be stronger than the other, and the older will serve the younger." When the time came for her to give birth, there were twin boys in her womb. The first one came out as red, and his whole body was like a hairy garment. So they named him Esau. After this, his brother came out with his hand grasping Esau's heel. So he was named Jacob. Isaac was 60 years old when Rebekah gave birth to them. The boys grew up. Esau became a skillful hunter, a man of the open country, while Jacob was content to stay at home in the tents. All right, so we have a homebody, we have a mama's boy, that is Jacob, he just wants to stay at home. And then we've got a man, we've got a father's man, and he wants to go out and hunt and run wild. And Esau was loved by his father. And little Jacob, who stayed at home, was loved by his mother. You see different personality. But listen to what happens. Verse 27, it says, okay, the boys grew up, and one became a hunter and the other one a homebody. And verse 29, it says, once Jacob was cooking some stew. The homeboy was cooking up some stew at home. And Esau came from the open country famished. He said to Jacob, quick, let me have some of that red stew. Let me have some of your chili. Let me have some of your Pueblo chili. I am famished. Jacob replied, first sell me your birthright, then I'll give you some of my Pueblo chili. Look, I am about to die, Esau said. What good is a birthright to me? But Jacob said, swear to me first. You swear to me. Pinky swear, and I will let you have my chili if you let me have your birthright. Then Jacob and so he swore to him, made an oath, and selling his birthright to Jacob. And Jacob gave Esau some bread and some lentil stew, and he ate and he drank, and he got up and left. So Esau despised his birthright. Wow! You see what happened? Esau traded his birthright as an older son. You see, the older son was the one who would get the highest blessing, who would get 2/3 of the blessing of the family, and the younger one would get 1/3. And Esau sells his birthright for a bowl of chili, And it says in the scripture, he despised his birthright. Now, later we read in the story of Esau and Jacob that Jacob, this conniving, cheating brother, steals a blessing away from his older brother. And you know the story. Now, what is the Bible teaching us? That the older one was the rightful heir of that blessing. He was the one who was born first. They're twin brothers, but he came out first. So he had the legitimate right to the greater portion of his blessings. And he took it for granted. He did not appreciate it. And he sold his birthright for a bowl of chili. And what God is saying to us, you may take God's blessing for granted. You may take God's presence in your life for granted. And here is the cheater, here is the conniving Jacob, and he was the one who was hungry for the blessing of God in his life. Now, that doesn't justify that he was a cheater. That doesn't justify that he was a conniving person. That doesn't justify that his mother was a big enabler. But still, God would deal with that character deficiency later on in Jacob's life. But he was the relative who was the most hungry for God's blessing. So it's not the most righteous, it's not the most morally upright who always gets the blessing in the family. It's the one who is hungry. Are you hungry for God's blessing? I hope so. God bless you. We'll see you tomorrow as we conclude our story and as we conclude this marvelous study on the lessons of hope. Hugo Venegas, God bless you.
Thank you for joining us. If you enjoyed our inspirational Bible study, like or subscribe below. Join us for worship online or in person. You can visit us at firstumcpueblo.org, or you can come by at 310 West 11th Street, Pueblo, Colorado 81003. Give us a call, 719-544-1917, and join us again tomorrow for another inspirational Bible study. We'll see you soon.